the found family is an important aspect because it helps to fill in the loss, because the loss will never be fully redressed in the heroine's journey, right? There will always be
Okay.
something, some sort of compromise that will lead to a reordering of the world that's not going to be as advantageous for the heroine. But
Okay.
she, in the process, returns to her nurturing role, which for her is fulfillment, right? For the
Mm-hmm.
heroine, the nurturing role is fulfillment. But she now has a larger and more stable family, because the people that the forces that she has sort of surrounded herself with, are usually marginal. They're usually strange. They're usually bizarre, and so
Mm.
it's a kind of expression of taking the chaos of the world that has been expressed by the breaking of the world and putting it into the womb of the mother and kind of saying it's okay. We're gonna make this world work. So it's less about
Oh.
her having to go through the process of becoming broken internally, because that happens at the beginning.
Hello there, friends. Andrea with the Bangs here. And on today's episode of She Wonders Why, I have the chance to speak with fantasy author and storyteller Nicholas Kotar about the heroine's journey, a concept I have been wanting to talk about for a long time. So it was a treat having the chance to speak with Nicholas about this topic. Nicholas has a series of books called Son of the Deathless, and I will link his website in the description below. I highly recommend those. And I highly recommend his podcast called In a Certain Kingdom. My boys and I thoroughly enjoy listening to these Slavic fairy tales that Nicholas so wonderfully narrates. And last but not least, check out Nicholas' Kickstarter campaign, which launches today, where you can help fund his latest project, a new fairy tale illustrated by a National Book Award finalist and designed by a Hollywood art director. Check out the Kickstarter in the description below. Now, on to the main event. If you are new, please do not forget to like and subscribe and leave me a comment. Welcome to my podcast, Nicholas Kotar.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, this has been something that I've been wondering about, the female hero's journey or heroine's journey.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm talking about a drug when I say heroine's journey.
Yes.
So, yeah, I just said female hero's journey. But I've been
Well,
wondering
actually,
about it for a long time. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, there's two different things. So you're gonna have to
Yes.
just get used to saying the drug thing, because
Okay,
it is a thing.
The heroine's journey. Yeah, it is. It is yes. Okay, let's normalize it. The heroine's journey. So I think I even did a podcast or an interview a couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago, with a gal who's a writer, and like she had ideas about it, but it's sort of, I feel like I've not found it or understood it, and I don't know why, and that's something that I wanna get into. I want to find out what it is, but then
Yeah.
I'd like to know why it's so little known.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, okay. Well, we can talk about it from a storyteller's perspective, which I think probably is the best, or at least to start with, because there are extensions of, you can talk about the hero's journey in a social context, as so many people do these days, and you could probably talk about the heroine's journey as well. But let's talk about it from the point of view of story. So,
Okay.
The hero's journey should be well known to everybody, because it's the Star Wars thing, right? It's
Yeah.
it's the Lord of the Rings. It's the traditional quest narrative, and it doesn't need to have a male main character. Most of the time it does, but it doesn't need to, especially in modern versions of it. But the structure of it is fairly simple. It has to do with an unwilling hero who is in a comfortable place, some form of very rooted home, and it's important that he doesn't want to go anywhere because he's comfortable and he's complacent and he doesn't want change. But that comfort
Good
and
morning,
complacency.
thank you. Good morning. I'm thinking of The
Yes,
Hobbit.
exactly. Yes, The Hobbit is a very good example of the hero's journey. It's quite classic. But the point is that his complacency or her complacency, it doesn't really matter at this point whether it's a man or a woman, is a reflection, although we don't know it yet, is a reflection of a larger decadence of home.
Okay.
So home needs to be fixed, or or he needs to be fixed or she needs to be fixed. So that happens on multiple levels. On the external level, the complacency does reflect something about the character being needing to go through a transformative process, but there's also something about home that needs to be fixed, and sometimes we don't see that until the end. Then there's a kind of it's called an inciting incident, usually mediated by a mentor figure, which in The Hobbit is basically Gandalf hiring Bilbo without Bilbo knowing, and pushing him out the door and closing the door behind him, right? So it's usually uncomfortable.
Without a
handkerchief,
usually, no less, yes.
I mean, exactly. It's quite terrible. Yeah. I mean, what is he going to do? But eventually there's an acceptance of the call to adventure, and then there's a series of try-fail sequences or disasters or attempts to do something heroic that end in a terrible disaster, that then forces the character to reassess, try something else, fail again disastrously, and that, depending on how long the story is, those cycles go on again and again and again. In the traditional fairy tales that follow this structure, usually the try-fail sequence is fairly similar. Like in the Russian fairy tale, Prince Ivan and the Grey Wolf, he does the same thing 3 times. Like he makes the same mistake 3 times. And 3, of course, is an important number. It has to do with completion, it has to do with eternity, it has to do with the fullness of the process of transformation. At some point, there is the ultimate encounter with the monster, the dragon, the villain. And there needs to be a failure, the ultimate failure at that point. So there is a moment either where the hero dies or the hero fails in such a spectacular way that seems like there's no possible way for him to get out of it. And that's followed by something called the Dark Night of the Soul, where the hero has to come to terms with his ultimate failure. Usually in the best kinds of stories, the way this hero gets out of that is by something called a eucatastrophe. That's what Tolkien calls it. A good unexpected turn of events that is usually mediated by a character that is not beholden to the main character. So it's not a deus ex machina. It's not a situation where the gods come in and save the character from his own stupidity. There's usually something that the character has done throughout the story that makes it possible for divine powers of some kind to intervene. So he has somehow shown himself to be worthy of divine intervention. And that divine intervention is, so it's not a kind of I pay you, you pay me back situation. It's usually an expression of some kind of humility, an expression of some kind of capacity for transformation that happens early on in the failure, that then allows for the character to have this intervention. And through that intervention,
could you give an example?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. So the Hobbit example is Bilbo fails because he gets the dragon angry, right? The dragon comes out and it decides that it's going to attack Lake Town. So in Bilbo's attempt to not defeat the dragon, he's not going to defeat the dragon. He's going to burgle the dragon. That's his quest. But in his attempts to get there without the dragon noticing, he unleashes the beast. So that's a major failure.
Yes. Okay.
And the unexpected turn comes when Bard kills the dragon
when Bard isn't part of.
Right, he's not part of Bilbo's story at all.
Okay.
However, Bard is an expression of a deeper reality that Bilbo is bringing back into the world. So the world is a bit broken. The world of the Hobbit is a bit broken because there's all these warring factions. There's a real sense of everybody having an inheritance that they're not getting and that they need to get. That's expressed with the dwarves not having their kingdom, the elves being kind of in this besieged area of Mirkwood, and the necromancer is really not far from them, and they're kind of walled off against everybody, like leave us alone, right? And Lake Town being essentially kind of stuck in a place of sort of mercantile success. It's corrupt. I mean, the movie really brings it out to an obscene level that I really don't like, but
that's why
the Master of Lake Town.
Yes.
No. Yeah, me neither. I stopped. It was just absurd.
Yeah.
But the Master of Lake Town in the books is a very corrupt figure who's motivated by money, and he is usurping the place of the rightful king, and the rightful king is a Bard is of the line of the rightful king.
Right.
So in Bilbo's constantly trying to So throughout the course of the book, Bilbo is failing all the time, but he's also finding his heroism throughout the process. Like he has to face his fears, he has to face his hobbitness, he has to face the incompetence of the dwarves, and he's always coming up with interesting ideas that tend to help in the short term and also move him towards heroism in the long term.
Okay.
Because if you see Bilbo at the very beginning, there's no way he would have been able to face the dragon. If he had walked after the first few days, if he had walked into the mountain,
the
dragon would
deal
have
with the trolls.
no.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I mean, the dragon would have eaten him, and that would have been the end of the story. Or he might not even have gone into the room in the first place and just kind of stayed in there and starved from fear or something. I don't know, but yeah. So it almost seems like a Deus Ex Machina kind of unfair resolution to the problem of Bilbo's failure by having someone else fix his problem. But actually, it's not, because Bard is by doing that is basically, so he's listening to the bird, right? And the bird is an expression of the wild, of the potential forces on the margin that keep things in order or keep things hemmed in. That because it's a weird thing. It's a speaking bird, and it would take a special kind of human being in this broken world to actually have the wisdom to listen to the voice of nature, to the voice of the wild wisdom, right? The wisdom in the wild, which is oftentimes symbolized by passing into the forest, kind of thing, right? So when he does it, he's actually completing what Bilbo has started, because Bilbo is everywhere he goes. He's kind of he's agitating the established order, but in such a way that helps restore the balance between what is wild and what is orderly in the proper way. So he's pushing the wild back to where it's supposed to be, but he's also allowing the positive forces of the wild to come back into the excessively orderly world of the Master of Laketown, and to allow for kind of, in a Christian sense, it would mean kind of the reintroduction of grace into a world of excessive formalism, right? A kind of allowing the spirit back into a place where everybody has been dry for a very long time. And after that, the dragon is dead, and so the rest of the story can happen, and Bilbo can do his final act of heroism. That's by burgling the Arkenstone and giving it to the proper people, right? And then coming home and, in some sense, starting to fix the brokenness of home, which then gets ultimately resolved in Lord of the Rings.
Like 3 books later, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's all one story. It's all one big story.
Yes, yeah.
And in the small scale, he redresses the wrongs by taking his home back from Lobelia Sackville Baggins. Because that was the the imposition of chaos into the orderly world of Hobbiton, where chaos is supposed to be beyond the borders of the cultivated, right? So because the Hobbit world is entirely a world of gardens, not a world of wildness. But he's wild. He's been touched by the wild. So when he comes back in, he's always going to be a weirdo, right? But he's the kind of weirdo that puts things in the proper perspective, and that's why the young people love him.
And so that's the hero's journey. We just did a little circle of the hero. Okay.
That's right. And it is a circle, because you always have to come home, and your coming home is going to change your home as well, because you've been changed by the process. So it's very important for the hero to return, because the ultimate resolution of the hero's journey is not so much the internal transformation, although that's important. It's the transformation of the place because of the internal transformation. So there's a real connection between place and character. That's one of the reasons why this particular structure of story has persisted for so long, because it very accurately represents the connection between personal transformation and transformation of community. So in a very real sense, these kinds of stories are true because they reflect reality the way it actually is. I mean, it reflects the fact that we as individuals can and should affect our communities through our own personal transformation. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Okay, so now can we do a little walkthrough? I'm guessing it's a circle
of the heroine's journey. Yes. Yes, it is a circle. Okay. So the heroine's journey is less known, but just because I think it's a little bit less of a... Actually, I don't really know, and different people have different opinions on it. What I'm talking about here is mostly taken out of a book that's called The Heroine's Journey by Gail Carriger. She's a very well-known New York Times bestselling novelist. And the book itself is an excellent craft manual for writers. I don't agree with her worldview generally. I don't really agree with her assessment of what the hero's journey is and what the hero's journey's sort of weaknesses are. she's very feminist, and she's unavowedly feminist. She comes from an academic background, and as you know, in academia these days, things tend to be very much on the left. So she comes from that perspective. She doesn't apologize for it, but her breakdown of the actual heroine's journey is very useful. So she talks about the most ancient version of it, which is the myth of Demeter, or the myth of Persephone.
Right. Okay.
So it's different, but it's similar. You're going to notice some similar beats. So there is an inciting incident. There's some sort of event that causes the events to happen. It, however, is not a decision of the character to go outside of home, outside of oneself, and accept the call of adventure. The heroine's journey is a response to loss. So there is usually some form of abduction, or breakdown of family, or murder, or rape, or something like this. There is some sort of tragedy, usually. And it's sometimes not as stark as that, but there is a breakdown of a family unit. And that family unit is a representation of the larger home that we find in both the hero and the heroine's journey. So in the myth of Demeter, it's the rape in the larger sense of Persephone, meaning that where Hades steals her, right, for himself, and tries to force her to become his wife. And Demeter is left with no family. So what happens at that point is it's a much less of a self-assertive journey of going out into the darkness, going out into danger, and encountering danger outside as well as danger within. It's much more a passive journey. So what the heroine does is she changes her appearance in some way. She leaves home and she changes. She transforms. Demeter puts on the rags of an old woman. But this can happen in any number of ways, and it does happen in any number of ways in the fairy tales. There's a Russian fairy tale that skews fairly close to the heroine's journey. It's called the story of Finist, the Bright Falcon, where there's a very successful romance between a young girl and a prince who's a shapeshifter. He turns into a falcon for no apparent reason, just because these things happen in stories. But her sisters make it look like she sets a trap for him, and he, in his falcon form, becomes injured. He bloodies himself by trying to land on a windowsill that's covered in shards of glass in some versions of the story, and in other versions it's nails. And so he runs away from her, thinking that she's been making fun of him, laughing at him. So her family unit, her romance in this case, has been destroyed. So it's not a family of blood; it's a family of romantic love. She then assumes the guise of a traveler and puts on metal shoes and carries a metal staff and eats metal bread, and is a kind of symbolic representation of becoming the most unhuman thing you can possibly imagine. So putting on an external change onto her, and she's very beautiful and young, right? So she becomes this hag-like, strange, wandering character that then goes into the forest also, in the same way as the hero has to go into the forest being a representation of the world outside what is comfortable. But in the process, she, instead of going out and encountering the dangerous, she gathers friends along the way. And these friends all have very specific functions in the story that are usually some sort of talent that helps her get out of a difficult situation. So rather than overcoming these situations by kind of blazing forward sword first and failing miserably, she retreats, attracts through her position of passivity a new family, a found family of usually very odd and eccentric types who have very specific talents and very specific powers, who then help her get through the difficulty of the initial journey. There's also a travel into the underworld. And it's in the underworld that she has to encounter a series of trials. Very often those series of trials are very symbolic. They have to do with taking life out of death, taking beauty out of ugliness, things like this. And it's through the help of her friends and simply overcoming the difficulty by being kind of a center of virtue, of love, of persistence, of patience, that the world itself shifts around her And there is a moment when the villain abandons his plot, not through a battle, but because the whole world has come to see the suffering or the difficulty of the main heroine character, and has decided that this needs to be redressed. So the whole world shifts around her, and
Okay,
the right is wronged. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of an example, and I'm having trouble.
So in modern stories, the most common use of the heroine's journey is in romantic comedies. So in romantic comedies, there's always a moment where there's a loss, there's a gathering of friends, of found family people that provide the um, that provide the love and the warmth that she has lost because of something that has happened to her. The romance not working because of a mistake is always right. There's always that moment where the romance doesn't work because there's a stupid error that somebody made or a misunderstanding. Or romantic comedies are really quite silly in that sense because they don't really reflect reality. But they're not silly on the other hand because they reflect the deep storytelling pattern. Because that misunderstanding or that unrealistic problem is a reflection of the world being unfair to the main character, and she has to accept it. And through the process of processing grief and kind of overcoming within herself some sort of insufficiency or some sort of character flaw, usually with the help of that found family, the world then shifts because there's another unexplained event that then pushes them back together. Some sort of in Sweet Home Alabama, it's the lightning strike, right? So that's the whole world kind of shifting back to make things work. Now, the romantic comedy is an imperfect expression of the heroine's journey because usually the end of the heroine's journey is a compromise. It's not a fully happy ending. So in the myth of Demeter and the Persephone myth, because Demeter goes into the underworld and because she does things like take beauty out of ugliness, there's the whole series of things she has to do. I don't remember the details, to be honest. The gods themselves force Hades to return Persephone back to her, but only for half of the year.
Right.
So there is a new order that's established. She returns back to her previous position as being goddess. She's no longer a wandering traveler, but she also has to become comfortable with the fact that the world is not going to be the same as it was before. But the comfort she receives is in her newfound family, is in the collection of characters that have come about around her that help her deal with this new reality. Another example of this is Harry Potter, actually. Harry Potter's not a hero, he's a heroine, except there's also elements of the hero's journey in his story. Okay. You'll notice because he always allows the other people in his found family to express their powers. Hermione's always figuring stuff out. Yeah. Ron is always bumbling into the right, answers.
Yeah.
And don't forget, in the last book, right? He doesn't take the sword. It's Neville that takes the sword. Yeah. He allows Neville to express to become the heroic paragon, while he sacrifices himself. And it's through his self-sacrifice that the world itself shifts around and Voldemort loses his power, because by that act of sacrifice, he's allowing for the love that comes from sacrifice to redress the wrongs that have been done to him and to the world.
Is sacrifice an aspect of the heroine's journey? Is that a feminine aspect?
Yes. It's sacrifice happens in both. Sacrifice happens in both. It can
happen in both, but in different expressions, in sort of...
Yes. Okay. Because the sacrifice of the main character is usually a death that happens from, or a kind of death, whether it's physical or not, that happens from the battle. So it's in the going out and the ultimate expression of heroism, really attacking the dragon when there's no hope of victory, that he has to fail. And that's what Frodo does in The Lord of the Rings by coming to the cracks of Mount Doom, pushing himself to the ultimate expression of pain and suffering, and coming to the point where he's supposed to throw it and he can't do it, right? And so his sacrifice then is leaving Middle Earth after he fails.
Right. So what's the difference between the feminine and the masculine versions of sacrifice then?
The feminine sacrifice is passive.
So offering yourself up rather than going into battle.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's the world breaks when her family is broken, and her going out into the world as a changed person, as a wanderer, as a transformed individual, is an expression of the breaking of the world. But it's also an expression of an incorrectness in her having to go out from the safe place of the womb, because she is a mother and she's supposed to be at the hearth. That's where
Mm-hmm.
Demeter is the goddess of the hearth, right? She needs to be there. That's her place. And by leaving it, she's breaking the world.
Okay.
So by
Also, I'm
accepting,
sorry, but it's Hestia that's the goddess of the hearth, but she's the goddess of summer. Sorry, not summer,
right.
the harvest. I'm sorry, I'm
Yes,
just
yes, you're right.
very
You're
like,
absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
I'm
Yes.
like, well,
Yes.
actually, I have to
Well,
take my
actually,
opportunity.
yeah, fair enough, fair enough. But
Yeah.
if not the hearth, then at least the
Well,
fertility. Fertility is a
yes, yeah,
kind
the
of
harvest, yeah, yeah, yeah,
expression
yeah,
of domesticity and being at home.
yeah.
So I think the yeah.
It
So
still
it could have
stands. I'm just being well, actually. I'm
no, no,
sorry.
no. I thank you. I appreciate that. And
Okay.
I should have known better. So
No, no. Okay, well, so see the other elements you've listed, I can see that. That makes
yeah.
sense. But I've never noted or thought of that transformation aspect.
hmm
What's that about?
in both journeys, in one or the
No,
other,
in
which
the
one are you
in
talking about
the
specifically?
in the heroine when you're saying she like dons this like sort of
Yep.
traveler haggard sort of appearance depending on
Yep.
which story we're talking about. Why must she transform her appearance?
Because it's an expression of her world being broken. So her identity is tied to the family that she had, tied to the home that she had, and since that has been broken, she's no longer herself, and so she
Okay.
has to. It's an expression of her inner emptiness on some level. If you want to talk symbolically, especially in these myths, because in myths, the archetypal actions of the characters always reflect some sort of deep inner reality. So because this has been her entire life, right? Her family is her existence, because that's what the mother is. The mother is the nurturing force, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the mother is denied the possibility of being the nurturing force, then the mother goes into mourning, but she also changes from the mother to the crone.
Mm.
She's no longer capable of providing that kind of atmosphere of domesticity, that kind of place to which everybody must come and find comfort and find solace and find family. She's no longer able to provide it, so she's going to leave and no longer give it to anyone. And in the act of not giving it to anyone, the whole world begins to shake, because in the denial of a single mother's ability to be a mother, the whole aspect of motherhood is put into question. So that's why she has to change herself physically, because in the physical change, the internal change is reflected. Right? Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yes. Well,
Because in fairy tales, like, external actions are very strongly associated with internal realities,
mm-hmm,
very
mm-hmm.
like one to one. That's just how they
Yes.
work. That's why fantasy is such an effective storytelling tool, because it does the same thing generally.
So in the hero's journey, is there an outward transformation?
Um,
It must be different. I don't recall there being like
in terms of him putting on like a different set of clothing or something like this.
is okay. So I'm thinking armor. I'm thinking
Yeah,
Bilbo
yeah.
getting Sting. Like so, it's just sort of. I don't want to say superficial, but it's
It
quite
is
not.
superficial.
It
No,
okay
it's
okay
about the acquisition of things, right?
okay.
It's about the acquisition of objects that represent on some level the going out of yourself. So it's an interesting question, Andrea, and actually I haven't thought about it, but since you're putting me on the spot, I think that the fact that the heroine has to change her appearance is very significant, and the hero doesn't. I think that's true. I think that's true. There isn't but then what happens to the hero is that, so let's take the story of Prince Ivan and the Grey Wolf. He's actually chopped into pieces at the end of the story. He's not just killed, like, but his entire
Sivanas?
selfhood. Yes, he's chopped into pieces by his
Oh.
brother. Yeah, and
Oh, okay. I just listened to your retelling of a different version of it,
yes, that
and
that
I'm like,
version
I
doesn't
don't
have it.
remember
No,
that.
no, no,
So it's
no.
been a while since I heard that.
It's yeah. If the very first episode of In a Certain Kingdom, my storytelling podcast, has
Okay.
the version where he gets chopped into pieces.
Okay.
Yeah, which is that's the more traditional one. That's the one that a lot of people know, and I think in some ways it's the more correct one, because his repeated mistakes have to result in his death,
Okay.
because he needs to learn the ultimate humility before the powers of the forest,
Okay.
and he still thinks he's capable of doing things by himself at the end, and so only after he's put back together by the wolf, um, can he finally make that step into total heroism, which
Okay.
is an admission that yes, I have the power to go out into the darkness and defeat the beast, but if I do that without the help, without the humble reliance on the help of those who are outside of me, the ones that regulate the order of the universe, I will fail and I will die. Um,
So that's so
so
in okay, and over in the skipping over to the heroine's
heroine's journey,
journey. So
yes,
does
yeah,
she or he, depending,
yeah,
do they more openly welcome the help at the near the end, so they don't need to be
yes.
chopped up into pieces? And
Well,
maybe
yes,
that. Oh, okay,
yes,
I'm trying to
exactly.
tie in the outward change
Hmm.
as accepting the. Is it maybe accepting it a little bit on a
Well,
not
yes,
on a deeper
because
level?
yes, no, you're right, because the found family is an important aspect because it helps to fill in the loss, because the loss will never be fully redressed in the heroine's journey, right? There will always be
Okay.
something, some sort of compromise that will lead to a reordering of the world that's not going to be as advantageous for the heroine. But
Okay.
she, in the process, returns to her nurturing role, which for her is fulfillment, right? For the
Mm-hmm.
heroine, the nurturing role is fulfillment. But she now has a larger and more stable family, because the people that the forces that she has sort of surrounded herself with are usually marginal. They're usually strange. They're usually bizarre, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's a kind of expression of taking the chaos of the world that has been expressed by the breaking of the world and putting it into the womb of the mother and kind of saying it's okay. We're gonna make this world work. So it's less about
Mm.
her having to go through the process of becoming broken internally, because that happens at the beginning,
That already
and it happens
happened.
through
Okay.
through
Yes.
yeah, because for her it's a different thing. She doesn't need the heroine is complete in some way at the beginning, because
Interesting. Okay.
she is the womb, right? She
Okay.
is the womb. She doesn't need to come out of the womb because she is the womb. The
Okay.
hero needs to come out of the womb because he's incomplete, right? So it's less about, so in on some, and if we want to extend this a little bit, it is on some level a very deep expression of traditional uh, gender roles,
Right.
uh, in the sense that in traditional societies, the man goes out and faces danger for the sake of the home, and comes back to change the home through his transformation. The
Mm-hmm.
heroine wants to stay at home and only leaves home in cases of extreme disaster, at which point she will need the whole world to then shift around her to put things back into place.
What does that mean? That the whole world will have to shift around her? Like that. That sounds like a big ask,
It
but it
is,
also
but she
sounds
doesn't
like it's
ask.
the appropriate thing in this. Like
Yeah.
that. That should happen is what it sounds like.
Well, what's interesting is that that's not her ask, right? Her ask is, I want things to be the way they were before. I want things to
Okay.
go back to the way they were. I want my daughter back, says Demeter, right? But that can't happen because Persephone has her own journey, right? Persephone has a kind of heroine's journey also. And in the act of being taken by Hades, there is a level of knowledge that she comes to have through this
Right.
act of violence that's perpetrated on her. So she's not a victim, not completely, right? She is a victim, but through she actually manages to find some strength through the process of coming to knowledge. So
Okay.
the world can't return. She can't go back to the womb. So she, in some sense, is actually a heroic figure, a male heroic figure, if you look at it from her perspective. Um,
Oh.
and it's actually not good for the mother. If you think about it purely in sort of psychological or earthly terms, it's not good for the mother to want things to be the same always.
Right.
So the great journey of the mother, as you know, is to be okay with the great tragedy of the home being broken,
Mm-hmm.
of the children leaving the nest, and the world that then reassembles itself around her is going to be different, but it can acquire a level of domesticity, perhaps not the same as it had before, but it can once again become a home, and the world can once again be right. And
Okay.
that's oftentimes through found family, through new associations, through new friendships, through and now I'm talking in real world terms, but these are things that are expressed very deeply by the archetypal stories.
So the world shifting around, it's not, it just, I guess the wording, I'm trying to be like, how are
Yeah.
you going to get everyone to
Yes.
do the shift? But
Well,
because it sounds,
it's
but
not done
it
by
just
everybody. It's the
happens.
world itself. Yes, it's the
It just
world itself.
happens.
So it's not, yeah.
Okay.
So in the myth of Demeter, it's the gods that do the shifting, but since they're gods, that's what they do, right?
Yeah.
But
Okay.
there is this ineffable kind of grace moment. It's a different kind of eucatastrophe for the heroine's journey, but it is
Oh,
a
okay. So
eucatastrophe.
that's what. So now that
Yeah.
explains it and makes it make sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's sort
Right.
of like,
So it's still sort of an unlooked for help, which is how
okay.
all disasters are resolved. That's just simply a fact of life,
Right.
is that
Yes.
we can never fully save ourselves. We can only do so much, and then we must be saved, right? But
So
the hero is
okay.
saved one way, and the heroine in another.
So this is my other question is to help how to figure out whether someone's on a hero or heroine's journey in a
Yes.
story,
Yeah.
because I, again, the thing about changing your appearance, like the one I'm thinking of is the Hans Christian Andersen's
Hmm.
Snow Queen. I mean,
Hmm.
not Frozen. That is
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
what I'm
No,
talking about. But
that's
so the Snow
definitely a
Queen.
heroine's journey. That is definitely a
Okay,
heroine's
but
journey. Yes.
I don't remember her changing her appearance. She's just this little girl. I mean,
Yeah,
she
she
maybe
loses her
put on.
shoes. She loses her shoes.
She
Remember?
loses her shoes.
She loses her shoes.
I
Yeah.
forgot
She has to walk
that.
barefoot. Yeah.
Okay, so okay, so sometimes the transformation isn't quite as
Yeah.
lady to haggard woman. It could
I
just
mean,
be
I
a
guess it will.
lack of something
Yes.
like the shoes.
Yes, I think it depends on how archetypal your story is. I mean, with Hans Christian Andersen, it's definitely a fairy tale, but it's not a fairy tale in the ancient sense where you have a parallel reality with kind of legendary cities and legendary characters working out their fates in a place that's parallel to the real world, right?
Right.
Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales are rooted in geographic and historical reality, but they are stories that with archetypal movement to them. So
Okay.
the way that that's going to be expressed is going to be a little bit more specific. But
Mm.
if you think just from the perspective of Gerda, the main character, I think it's Gerda.
Sure.
I forgot. Yeah, I forgot.
I don't. The little
It's a
girl.
wonderful story. The original story is absolutely
I know.
wonderful.
I'm like, why did you change? You're looking for heroines.
Yeah.
She's a heroine. You don't need to change anything.
Well, Frozen is a heroine's journey. It's just the wrong kind of heroine's journey, I
Well,
think, because
yes,
the
well,
problem
they
with
changed it, but I know they had lots of problems with the story because they kept on
yeah.
shifting, and Elsa was going to be, well, the Snow Queen originally, the bad one,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
at
and
that point, it's just yeah.
whatever.
It's I
Sorry,
mean,
sorry. The gal, the main girl, she's a little
yeah,
girl, right? So
yeah,
that's why that one came to mind because her friend, her best friend, is
yeah,
taken, and
yeah,
he's needing to be, and that's why she sets out, and she meets a lot of sort of unlikely
yeah,
motley crew type
yeah.
little
Like
friends.
the robber girl,
Yes.
the daughter of the thief. I mean,
Yes.
it's a
Doesn't she find a
fantastic thing.
prince or something who helps lets them go or
Yes,
some, and she's not
yes,
interested
yeah,
in him. She's like, "Oh,
yeah.
thanks."
A prince and princess who just got married, and yeah,
Oh,
it's
right.
very,
Yes, and then
and they
there's the
give her food.
caribou.
They
And the
provide her
caribou
with
who
stuff, and there's
flies
a
or
caribou.
something. Or maybe he
Yes,
just
yes.
runs. Maybe I'm adding a
He's
little bit of
really
Team
fast. He's
Sandhill
very
stuff.
fast.
He may as well fly. Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
And okay, so that to me, so that makes me really happy that I identified an actual heroine's journey,
Hmm.
because sometimes it's difficult. Like I wouldn't have thought of Harry Potter because that one is a little
Yeah.
bit difficult to tell because it is a guy, it is a fella,
Yes.
and
Yes.
but I mean the found family thing, like that definitely makes sense.
Hmm.
To
Yeah,
me.
and it doesn't matter if you're a boy or girl really ultimately. I mean the archetypal stories will always have a male hero and a female heroine. The myths,
Right.
the ones that go way back because the purpose of those stories is to express reality on a very deep level. So you're going to want to be as consistent as you can. And if you're a modern storyteller and you want to reflect that kind of sort of deeply uh, deep reality of storytelling that goes back thousands of years, then you
Hmm.
probably want to stick as close as you can to the details as much as you can. But in
Right.
playing with them, you're revealing interesting and unexpected things. I mean, the most obvious hero's journey with the female character is Wonder Woman. It's a
Right.
straight up the movie is a straight up hero's journey. I mean, it's like it's beat by beat by beat a hero's journey, and it's very effective. You know, she's an Amazon. That's she's supposed to be a hero. She's not a nurturing
Right.
mother type.
Right. Well, wait, does she ever return home? I guess I'm thinking of the movie. I know in the comics, I'm sure she does. Does she?
Her home is the relationship with Steve, which she loses, right? Um,
Right,
and
but how does she go back if he dies?
Yeah, well, he comes back in the other movie, doesn't he?
Well, yeah. Well, I didn't watch that one, but yeah. Well, technically, she has to let him go again, I think. But I know
I
that
mean,
they don't
it's
have to have all
with
of
her,
the.
it's literally coming home, I think. So, um, her coming home and changing isn't going back to Theatira, but it's going back to a home having been transformed. So
Okay.
when she becomes a member of the Justice League, right?
Hmm.
That's her coming home and changing reality, right?
Okay.
It's not necessarily the physical place. Again, these are things you can play around with, right? Um,
Okay, so you're
because
being a little
her
too literal. Okay, so this is why this is good because I'm like,
yeah,
well, which how do we know which to alter? But you're like, no, no, it's
I mean,
technically not altering because you can look
it's
at
in
it.
the playing with the details that you really get interesting
Yes.
things. I mean, the most interesting recent book that I read that really plays with the tropes of both journeys is Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis.
Yes.
Um,
Okay. I've
because
read that one.
Orwell,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
a wonderful book.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't like the first time I read it, but I think it's because I didn't understand. I wasn't
I
old
feel
enough.
like I
You have to,
didn't really. Yes, I liked it, but I didn't. You know, when you're grasping at something that you know, I
mhm.
know it, but I don't.
Yes,
It's when I
yeah,
was a child. Okay, when I was sorry, quick story time. When I
yeah,
was a
yeah.
kid
I
and I
love story time.
watched Animaniacs. Do you remember
Yeah,
that? They
yes,
put
I
a
do.
lot. Okay, they actually put a lot of modern, not modern, but like throwbacks of. I remember they had Cher, they had the Beatles, they had different adult world like sort of
Yeah,
cues
yeah, yes,
that kids are like, I don't know, but I knew it was something. I'm like, I know this is something, but I don't know what. It's like knowing you don't get a joke,
yeah,
but you know it's supposed to be a joke and you don't get it. It's like that. And I
yes,
always was like,
yes,
I want to know what that is. And I feel like that's why I really like
yeah,
pop culture and, or not necessarily
yeah.
pop culture, but like the history of what's
Sure.
happened in such things. And so, anyway, that's what reading Till We Have Faces was like for me. I
Hmm.
was like,
Hmm.
I know that there is something that I am not getting. So,
Yeah, and because I mean, it's like a palimpsest. It's like a manuscript with layers, with many layers in it. And if you're looking just at the surface level of it, it's not a very satisfying story, to be honest. But if you start to read it through the lens of the hero's journey and the heroine's journey, especially since the story is taking place in a kind of ancient Greek inspired
yeah,
place, it's
yeah,
made up, but it's clearly taking its cues from that world. You can see that Orwell's failure is in assuming the role of the male hero, which she does very well. And the first half of the book, or book one rather, is her hero's journey. It's her successful hero's journey. But she ends her successful hero's journey by, kind of being on the edge of death, having had a very successful reign and having
hmm,
transformed her home into a better place by encountering the dragon outside of her
right.
by becoming this heroic figure.
But wait,
But
she
at the
veils her
end,
face, and that's a change of.
that's a hint that she's going to have to assume the role of a heroine
Okay.
at some point. Yeah, so
Because it
it's a
feels like
cue that
she's kind of like the villain at points, though, with
for sure, yeah,
her sister.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Oh no, definitely, no, she's definitely, if you're looking at it from the perspective of Psyche,
Yeah.
she's playing the role of one of the evil sisters. Absolutely, there's no doubt about
Right.
it.
Okay. Which is, I know,
Um,
the most like, oh yeah, of course, it's the retelling, but like from a different perspective. It's sort of what
yeah,
Disney's trying to do with, say,
yes,
Maleficent.
yes,
Like, but C.S. Lewis clearly was. I would say, I mean, honestly, Maleficent isn't the worst of the from the villain perspectives, but I think
yes,
that
yes,
obviously Lewis was much more successful at switching it. So it's a okay. So sorry. That's a hint. You said that. So she's doing the
Yep.
heroes. She's being a king ultimately, even though she's the
Yeah.
queen. But like, and
Exactly. Yeah.
then and then at the end. So what? Okay, I need this
So in the
personal.
at the
So
end, she has to fully change her appearance, right? Because she sees the expression of Psyche as a goddess, right? She sees
yes,
the and Psyche is veiled. I think the statue of the goddess is veiled,
is she
which is
okay? I
I
forgot that
think so if I
detail.
remember correctly. I might be wrong, but she realizes Psyche's alive, and um, she has to vicariously go through the sufferings of Psyche. And in going through the sufferings of Psyche, she goes outside of herself and she becomes another person. She becomes Psyche. Uh, she and Psyche become one character. There's a very strange uh, sequence in the end where she's having
Okay,
these vision dreams
okay.
where she is undergoing Psyche's trials. Like Psyche is
Oh
told
yeah,
to do
yeah.
a bunch of things before she can become a goddess
Right,
again.
right.
And while she sleeps, someone does them for her, and that's her sister, even though her sister's not actually there. So there's this weird
And then
kind of
time
mythic.
is a little bit
Yeah.
off there too.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, see,
Yes.
I mean, I read the ending. I didn't understand it at all.
Yes.
I knew it was supposed to be this big triumphant, like, you did it and you get it now. But I'm like, I don't get it. So
Well,
that's
the big triumph is that she accepts her role as heroine.
okay.
She changes her aspect. She becomes someone else. She becomes the shadow character who is working in the dream space
Right.
of Psyche's dreams. She
Okay.
does all of Psyche's labors, uh, and she does them as an ugly person, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
she's uncovered at the end, and it turns out they're both Psyche in different ways. They're both heroines. They're both beautiful. They're both fully who they are. And
Okay.
what's so beautiful about it is that for Orwell, it's an integration of both the hero's journey and the heroine's, and she needs both to be fully human, to be fully realized in the light of the God who comes and descends on her and shines through her and reveals the truth about her. In that she
Okay.
is Psyche, but she's also Orwell. She's the hero, she's the king, but she's also the queen. She's both,
Oh, that's
and it's
okay. So
it's
when
really
you
beautiful,
said
actually.
playing with the tropes and playing with these
Hmm.
archetypal events,
Yeah.
that is because that's something that is so difficult for modern folks to really
Yes.
comprehend because of I'm looking at like, oh, okay, so she doesn't start at
Hmm.
the like she well her someone important to her was taken from her, but then she's shown proof that that person's fine,
Hmm.
but she's not fine. And it's
Yeah.
so she starts at a place that isn't the traditional start
That's of a hero's journey. So
of
her
hero or
start
heroine's journey. Like,
well
sorry, it is heroines,
it
but
is
then she
heroines,
says,
yes.
then she turns
She says,
and says
"No, I'm going to
no.
be a hero. I'm
But
going
then
to
she
be a
says
hero."
no.
Right?
Okay.
Got it?
I'm following
Yeah.
because before I was like, where does it even start? How does it even start at the beginning of the circle? Okay, she starts as the traditional feminine
Yeah.
motherly figure. Then
She
she
is the
says
mother to
no.
Psyche. She's Psyche's mother. She
Yes.
treats her like her
Okay.
child, and she becomes this kind of devouring mother
And
figure
then
because
I
when
thought of that because that's why I didn't think, oh,
yeah,
she turns into a hero here. I think, oh, she becomes the devouring mother, but
yeah,
also the hero because of taking up her
after.
role as king. Okay,
Yes. Okay, so
as the head
but
of her country.
her
Okay,
she causes the heroine's loss to happen to her,
okay, because it
right?
didn't have
She
to
is
be a
the
loss because she could have accepted and be like, you're okay,
yeah.
okay, but I don't get to have you anymore.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Demeter with Persephone,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
okay.
So
Okay,
it's a more modern, it's a more psychological,
yeah,
very profound
psyche,
way
psychological,
of
yeah.
expressing it. Yeah, no, for sure. No, no, Tolkien. I'm not Tolkien. C.S. Lewis is really playing with stuff. He's really expressing the realities about
Yeah.
modern life and about
Oh, I want to
humanity
read
in
it
a very, very
again.
deep way. Yeah,
Okay.
it really struck me this time. But that's true. She's supposed to be the mother. She's supposed to be the traditional heroine, and she's supposed to accept the loss in the heroine's journey. She's supposed to go and do what the heroine does by finding
Okay.
a found family, by, kind of being the queen. But
Yeah.
she says, "No, I'm going to be the king." Uh,
Right.
and
Okay.
she
Okay.
she changes her aspect, which is a hint to the fact that she still needs to be a heroine,
Yeah.
right? But she's doing it all wrong, and so it
Right.
doesn't work. On the one hand, it does because the kingdom is
Yeah.
saved and
Yeah.
it's very successful, and she's considered to be the greatest queen of the time. But
Yeah.
internally, the transformation hasn't happened, so the hero's journey is incomplete. It needs to be completed by
Right.
the heroine's journey,
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, well, deep dive there, folks. Go read
right?
it. Tell me what faces.
Yeah, it's
But
beautiful.
it's well, no, but well because it's both, and that is really such a like phenomenal work that someone could fit both in the same
Hmm.
person. You could
Yep.
have both, in different. I think
It's just very
it's an option.
difficult to do it properly.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, to do it properly. Yeah, so that's very cool. Okay, okay. So, how do we want to? I feel like we kind of went through it. I feel like it's something that we don't get a lot of these.
Yeah.
And is it
Get a lot
because
of confusion instead.
yeah, yes. And so is it okay, actually I should change the question. Are there more heroines' journey stories in from myths that we just don't quite realize? Because to me, I would say, if you ask me, I'd say, oh, there's probably more heroes' journey myths than heroines' journey myths.
I don't know. I mean, in terms of counting how many, I think we're more aware of there being a lot of heroes' journeys just because they're reflected so profoundly in very important pop cultural
Okay.
things like Star Wars. But
Okay.
I'm not sure that an ancient person would necessarily sort of immediately associate, myth
Okay.
with the hero's journey.
Okay.
I think an ancient person would understand the difference between the two and probably wouldn't even categorize them as all that different.
Yeah.
Just sort of different sides of the same coin, maybe, because they
Right.
follow the same circular pattern. They both tend to go to the underworld, and at some point there is some sort of transformation, whether it's external or internal, and there's always a return home,
Yeah.
and the home is changed at the end in different
Okay.
ways, but there's a lot of similarity to the beats. I think that
Okay.
what the problem with what we're having right now is not so much kind of a preponderance of one or the other, but a desire to subvert both for the purposes of kind of political, kind of um, balancing out of what used to be marginalized. Like, these stories weren't told before, so we have to tell them now. But
Mm-hmm.
without the knowledge of the deep storytelling traditions of humanity, it all comes out really messed up and very confused, and kind of a hero's journey that's subverted, with the hero is actually the villain. Heroine's journeys where the heroine feels the need to become a hero, even though the structure demands or requires that she be a heroine, and it all
Right.
comes out very, very bizarre. Scarlet
Yes.
Witch is a very clear example of this, right? I mean, WandaVision is I didn't like it, but the way that Scarlet Witch ended up, I thought that actually they had a good instinct about what had to happen, because
Right.
she refused to accept the ending
Right.
um, of the world shifting around her, and
It
the
could have
only
been
way
good. Yeah,
it could have
I
been, yeah,
still hold like the first few episodes, like it actually like okay, could have,
yeah,
and then it was a bit
yeah,
of
yeah.
a dumpster fire at the end.
No,
But
no, it's
yeah,
yeah, it was.
yeah,
It couldn't. I honestly think it's because a lot of writers nowadays don't have the deep knowledge of storytelling history to be able to tell the kinds of stories that resonate. I mean, we're
yeah.
seeing this with the Rings of Power very strongly. I mean, this is something that
Oh
Richard and
yes,
Reno were talking about a lot. So
yeah, yeah,
it's unfortunate, this kind of general. It's like we don't know what we don't know. We don't realize how stupid we are in general, and we're put in positions where we're given millions of dollars, and we have to write stuff because
billions. Well,
yeah, and
billion.
some it's a billion, yeah,
Yeah,
and unable to do the job simply because we don't understand how these things actually work. Because
right.
these structures aren't like impositions from above or kind of like male hierarchical structures, forcing women to
Yeah,
assume submissive roles. No, these are people telling stories from their experience. There's no
right.
imposition from above. This is an organic thing. This is the way people have told stories for thousands of years, because this is the way people have told stories for thousands of years, just because that's just what it is.
Okay, so that actually, I do have a question regarding, you were saying about how for Prince Ivan and the Grey Wolf that there are these different, well, there's two different versions, and there are lots of different
Yeah.
versions, particularly of myth story endings. And,
Yeah.
I used to do deep dives where I would like look up myth
Hmm.
stories. And
Yeah.
also in some it ends here, others say it ends here, others say it ends here.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Hmm.
three, sometimes four different endings. I have a feeling that
Yeah.
they weren't going around, and by they I mean the peoples who told these stories. Well, this is the actual that other one.
Yes.
That's just that's the divergent timeline. Don't That's another
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
universe.
It's not
Don't worry
canon.
about
It's
that
not
one. Yeah,
canon.
yeah, yes, not canon. I have a feeling they didn't because I have a feeling it was probably regional that the stories
Hmm.
were ended up being told and they weren't clearly as connected as we are.
Hmm.
But
Sure. Yeah.
perhaps a traveler hears a different, version, and
Hmm.
I don't think that they would be upset. I'm guessing.
Oh, I agree. I agree. No, plus,
So,
I mean, the traveling storyteller is one trope, but the other trope is that the storyteller is actually the old woman of the village, and so she's going to be telling the story that's
old
most
wives'
appropriate
tales.
to that given moment. Yes.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Well, my question though is why do when we do change
Hmm.
things, it does feel like for the worse. Again, fandom's getting angry and angsty.
Yes, very
I'm
much.
gonna do a video. I'm gonna do a video on like how to the steps to go through to not always remain angsty to find
Yes,
your to find the good, because
good. You
I
should
don't
do
want
that.
to go against. I can be an angsty fan at times, so I don't want to be
Yes.
like going. I think that if you stay in a certain grumpy place, it's not good.
Hmm.
To
Agreed. Yeah.
but the reason why they're getting worked up into a frenzy of angst is
Hmm.
because it is bad. The
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah.
So why
No,
are the
but I
changes so
don't
bad?
think that yeah, I don't think it's because the nature of change is that it's always any change from any deviation from the norm is automatically going to be bad. I think it's because we're not rooted. We're not rooted people. We don't have connections to physical place. We don't have connection to the storytelling of our nation, of our people. In the US and in Canada, these are both very young countries, don't have a native storytelling tradition. They do have native storytelling traditions, but those are very small. They're very local. They have to do with sort of unique expressions within very small areas. They don't express. We haven't had time or the possibility before the coming of the internet to be able to have the kind of long process of developing a national story that happens in places like Russia, which has
Mm-hmm.
been around for 1,000 years and has a very profound storytelling tradition. That some very people that are more intelligent than I am say that that storytelling tradition is an expression, a storytelling, a deep cultural expression of a historical reality that lasted over 3, 4, 500, 600 years.
Mm-hmm.
So in a very real way a national story because it's the way that the people told uh, expressed who they are over a
Mm-hmm.
long period of time. So we don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we do have access to a lot of these traditions, so we could make it for ourselves if we wanted to. But that's on an individual level, and it's not happening for the culture makers right now. They're not doing the work because because the culture is largely a cultural deconstruction. It's a culture of breaking down. It's a culture of um, shining light on injustice and taking that injustice and making it general and trying to pretend like the injustice is endemic. And there are times in history where that's necessary. Those are times of revolution. Those are times of reformation. Those are also times where you don't have a large renaissance of culture. You tend to have a breakdown of culture during those times. Any iconoclastic time will have a breakdown of physical culture. So we're in an iconoclasm right now, and so our
Okay.
culture makers don't have the language, the knowledge, the ability, the desire to tell the kinds of stories that tend to express uh, express the or give the expression of what it means to be in a community in a time in a place. There are too
Okay.
many different small communities. They're all doing this
Right.
and
Right.
not trying to
Right.
find the common thread, which is really strange. Like because in all storytelling traditions, all storytelling traditions are rooted in small places. All of them. They come from very specific tiny regions,
Yeah.
but those regions within a larger country structure tend to come together to tell a unified story. And there's a lot of resistance to this right now, and it bugs me. It bugs me that
Well,
there's a lot of
why?
resistance to it.
Okay, I know that there's the iconoclasm thing that you
Yeah,
were describing. That's why, but I still want to know more why. Why the resistance to come together to tell a unified story?
because there's a fear that any sort of monolithic, unified, large culture will marginalize somebody.
Okay, but then
It,
this whole sort of global like
yeah.
society is a thing though. So why
Yes.
you people want a unified something? Sorry, not you
On the
people,
on
but
on the one
like
hand,
there's
but
certain
it's an enforced
aspects.
unity, and it's not a unity of culture. It's an ideological unity. It's a political unity. It's not a unity that
Okay.
comes from deep within. Because actually, I think whether they know it or not, what the resistance is a resistance to the only real expression of what it can mean to be human, which is to be in a place and to have the culture of the place in you and to have you change that place. As in the smallest possible place you can be. It means to be a good neighbor. It means to love your neighbor as yourself. That's why there are two commandments, right? There's to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Not to love the world as yourself. Love your neighbor.
Mm.
Your neighbor is the person next to you. That's always been a very deep reality of what it means to be human. And there was never a fear of this very strange fear that I'm seeing in a lot of places of, you know, the marginalized haven't had their voice heard. Let's give them voice now. Okay, fine. Let's give them voice. Let's give them a stage on which to speak.
Hmm.
But what's going to happen if you do that, if you do it properly, is unity between the different voices who learn
But
to sing in harmony
well,
like a
the thing
choir.
that you were saying regarding the heroine's journey and her finding the marginalized,
Yes.
usually, very typically, as if I'm an expert. From what I have seen in stories, the those on the margins are often monstrous or monsters,
Yes.
and in the
Yes.
hero's journey, he deals with those.
Yeah. He chops their heads off. Yeah.
Right, but I'm from what you're saying, I'm guessing the idea of these sort of found family of the marginalized people that are
Hmm.
strange and and becoming having the warmth of the mother
Hmm.
sort
Normalize them.
normalize. Yes, so that's like a sort of renewal or like a
Yes.
revivification of the margin. It's bringing them into the
Yes.
center,
Yes, and
but
they
then they
have
have
their
to,
monstrousness has to be softened. Okay, they can't continue to be monsters, right?
so
They
they
can
need to
have their
change.
no, they need to be softened, right? So
Okay, so it's not
they're
necessarily
still
change, it's just
their
softened. Okay.
identity isn't changed, but they're no longer as monstrous as they were. And by incorporating those monstrous elements into the center, you're actually allowing for the center to change. You're
Okay.
keeping it fresh. So
Okay.
it's a way of preventing decadence from coming because you want to have the
Okay.
the the safe the safe the safeified monstrous in the center if possible, right? So this isn't the stuff beyond the
Okay.
margin. This isn't the great darkness beyond the margins, right? This isn't the great Cthulhu out there, which you can
Right.
never integrate,
Right.
right?
Okay. Right. Of course. Yes. There's always the extreme, but then this is
And
just the borders of the land ideas. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
so that's why I actually think the heroine's journey as a story idea is actually a very good one for now, for right
It's
now.
very
Um,
important because that's what actually
yeah,
needs to be happening because this
yeah,
idea, I think, of um, let's just like all the different rainbows and the flags and how they're
yes,
adding more
yes,
and more colors. It
yes,
won't be a
yes,
flag. It will be too. Well, I mean, I suppose you can just make it smaller and smaller, but like it'll just be like
yeah,
a standard or a
yes.
banner, I suppose. But
Well,
it's
yes, yes,
right.
yeah,
But
exactly.
it's
Yeah,
bringing it
a
in
military
and
banner.
well, having Pride Week and then Pride Weekend, Pride
Hmm.
Parade, Pride Weekend,
Yeah.
Pride Week, Pride Month,
Hmm.
and I think the next is Pride Year. Like
Probably.
I'm
Yeah.
kind of half
Yeah.
joking, half
Once
not
every
joking.
once every 10 years there'll be a Pride year. Yeah, it wouldn't
Yes,
surprise me. Yeah.
and but that's actually not what is the, I guess, appropriate thing to do. What the appropriate thing to do is to bring the margin to the center, and what you're describing is
Yeah.
softening it so then
Hmm.
it can help with the decadence, and then
Yes.
we can help them with a home and. But not
Yes.
them. I'm not talking about necessarily pride people right now. But like
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
concept of it. It's
Yes.
because what really bugs me is this sort of like, oh, nowadays, like all these people, like that's really
Hmm.
othering
Yes.
everybody, depending on whoever
Everybody's
these
othering.
people
Yeah.
are,
Hmm.
depending on you and who these people are, you can go into left circles, right circles, all of them.
Yep.
It's like
Yep.
these people.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And it really, I don't like that anymore. I mean, not that I liked it before, but I didn't really notice it. But now I don't
Yeah.
like that, because what you're describing is it needs to be integrated, and we need to,
Yeah.
well, love that's loving your neighbor, loving
Yes. Yes.
um, people
But storytelling
more
is an
than
expression of love.
ideologies. Sorry,
Yes.
oh yeah, sorry. Storytelling is what's needed here.
It's an expression of love.
Right.
Telling a story is an expression of love. Because if you tell a
Oh,
story and it's not propaganda, you are including all those who are on the margins in the telling of the story.
right.
So that's what stories do. They integrate, they unify,
It
and that's what they
seems
should be
like the
doing, and
right
that's
way
what
to
they're
go.
not doing right now.
Right. Right, because the stories that are right, because if you like for Rings of Power, of course it's failing. Like
Yeah.
you can look at it like, oh well, it's a big billion-dollar like conglomerate,
Yeah.
Amazon. Of course, you could go from the of course angle from there,
Yeah.
but also from the other angles of, oh, we don't want people to be unified as humans.
Hmm.
We really want to, oh, so the Trumpians live in
Hmm.
Numenor,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then the
I mean, it
marginalized
becomes
elves live
propaganda
in the
basically. It's
Southlands, and the
yes,
women and
yes, yeah.
the
It's
flipping Harfoots that are
what yeah.
cannibals. They're not really. Sorry, they leave their or their weak
Yeah, they're
behind.
Darwinists. They're Darwinists.
Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah,
it
no,
just
I
of
mean
course.
that's not it's not good storytelling, right? Because when our archetypes are not taking a specific person or a specific category of people and applying that specific category very technically to your story, right?
Right.
It's about underlying realities. What they're doing
Right.
is basically propaganda. They're not even realizing it either because it's a lack of storytelling ability.
Right. Right.
Um, and I don't even think they realize they're doing it. Honestly, I think that what they're doing is is applying the reality of the
What
current
they
world to their
think.
storytelling
Yeah.
universe. Yes, but they don't have the nuance and the craft to be able to do that in a way that doesn't hit you on the head. And honestly, it's not the worst example of it. They're really trying very hard.
Okay.
They're trying
Yeah.
very hard to make this work. And it's
Yeah.
not working because honestly, I think it's not working because they don't have enough just writing chops. I don't think they're good enough writers. But
Right.
I mean, there are
You're
plenty
being
of other
very
things.
kind, by the way. Like, this is a very
I'm
kind.
trying.
I
I'm
know.
trying.
You're like, they're trying, and I'm like, we'll
No,
see in the
I
second
honestly
season. Apparently, it started filming. We'll
they
see
did, yeah.
how their trying goes. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, it assumes the possibility of them actually being able to learn from their mistakes.
Right.
So
Well,
let's
no,
hope.
that
Yeah.
is. Yeah, that is. We'll see if they'll learn. We'll see if Bezos like really like smacked down, or what kind of smackdown.
Who knows?
Well, okay,
Uh,
okay. So in this time, okay, so I do want to wrap up, but in this time of a sort of iconoclastic period,
yeah.
which is the breaking of things, just to give a little definition.
Yeah.
Is it possible to tell meaningful stories? And by that, I
Oh,
don't mean
yeah.
individuals. I know that I
Yeah.
know individuals can. I mean the regular storytellers. Sorry, the
Mm.
most seen storytellers,
Yeah.
which is Hollywood.
You're
I
it's a
suppose.
leading question, isn't it,
I
Andrew?
am. I'm sorry.
Yes, it's okay. Well, the full answer is in a conversation I had with Jonathan Pageau called "Strange Stories." So
Okay.
go check that out, everybody. But
Okay.
I think, and this is purely my opinion, but it's not just from my head. It's from talking to people who know more things than I do. In times of iconoclasm, I think it's for us storytellers, it's best to avoid the main stage because the main
Okay.
stage I don't think is capable of telling good stories anymore. I think that the people who are telling weird marginal stories right now, poets, professional storytellers, people who are mashing together different genres, trying out different techniques, people who are studying storytelling for
Mm-hmm.
themselves and really going deep into the craft of things, people who are publishing through small presses, people who are publishing kind of in unseen corners. Though somewhere there's going to be a lightning strike, and that little corner somewhere is going to become something that becomes more central.
Okay.
I hope at some
Okay.
time, it's in 10, 15, 20 years. So if any of your listeners are storytellers, I think now is not the time to go looking for the big book deal, to go look for the
Mm-hmm.
deal with Hollywood. I think now you dig deep and you work on telling the best story that you can,
Okay.
and just trying out different things and give time and Providence the chance to work.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to end. Thank you so much for going through the heroes and heroines journey and enlightening me, because I have been seeking this knowledge out for a while. My own heroine's journey.
Yes, no, absolutely. I'm
So,
very happy that you invited me. It was a real pleasure.
thank you so much.
If you would subscribe, that would be the bee's knees.